by now you've probably either read or at least heard of this book, Mainstreet Millionaire by Cody Sanchez. Now, in particular, this is really relevant at a time where people are looking at ways of making more money, how to increase their income, and ultimately give themselves that opportunity to work towards financial freedom in a shorter space of time. However, you might be wondering, especially if you're into property, how this could be relevant to you. Well, in particular, there's several parts of this book that talk specifically about the idea of deferred consideration. If you work in property and if you go to a lot of the networking events, you probably know this as vendor finance. This is where the seller of the property leaves some of the money on the table to take at a later date and essentially becomes the deposit. Now, can you do this in property? Yes, quite easily. Now, you can do this on both a bridging loan and on certain mortgage products as well. This means that you can get borrowing from the bank to buy the property and get the seller to be the deposit holder. Now, there's a couple of ways around that you can make this work. First of all, if you don't have a lot of money to put into the deal, it certainly restricts the amount of lenders that you can work with. But we still have some that will lend where the seller is the entire deposit holder. So in theory, you don't have to put any of your own money in as a deposit. You will have to put money in for things like valuation costs, broker fees, solicitors fees, etc. So it's still not an all money off the table deal. However, it will still work. There are other lenders on a bridge that will do it where you have to put in a small proportion of money, usually around 5 to 10%. But there's also mortgage lenders that will do deals straight to mortgage using the deferred consideration element, so long as you are putting at least 10% of the money into that deal. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be cash. That could also be that you've spent money on fees, professional fees. Let's say you're getting planning on a building and the seller's going to work with you to provide a deposit, but you've had to pay for planning permission, architect's fees, professional fees. This all counts towards having skin in the game. Now, what is another way of doing this in property? Well, let's say you're trying to propel your property investment quite quickly and you still want to use that element of deferred consideration and how you buy a business as well. This is where you can utilise something called a share purchase agreement, or an SPA. This is where you buy the entire property company and all of its assets together. The bonus here is that you're not paying stamp duty, or if you're in Wales, land transaction tax. Instead, you're paying 0.5% on the available shares within the company. So not only in this instance do you get to buy an entire business, you get to buy all of the property assets where the seller has been the deposit holder, and you're saving on the tax side as well. So plenty of inspiration from this book. If you haven't read it yet, I certainly suggest that you give it a try. Think about how this can work with your property investing, and please let me know if you need any help with the funding side, because we've certainly got you covered on that.